A group of wealthy foreign astronomers arrive in Jerusalem. They have traveled hundreds of miles from the east, following an astrological phenomenon, and they carry a single, highly disruptive question: where is the newborn king of the Jews? These men, the Magi, assume a royal birth means public rejoicing. They expect to find a capital city in the middle of a celebration. Instead, they find a city paralyzed by tension, gripping its collective breath in terror. Here in Jerusalem, the geographic and political center of power, the mere rumor of this child triggers an immediate psychological crisis. The religious elites and the political establishment are suddenly thrown into a deep, defensive panic. Before this infant can even speak or perform a miracle, his presence has shifted the focus of every powerful man in the city. The political gravity of Jerusalem is already being pulled away from the palace and toward a manger. The man most unsettled by this news is King Herod the Great. He commands immense wealth, oversees stunning architectural triumphs like the expansion of the Second Temple, and enjoys a lucrative alliance with Rome. But Herod is an Edomite placed in power by a foreign empire. The Jewish people he rules view him as an illegitimate usurper. Because of this, his grip on the throne feels entirely fragile, and he spends his life looking over his shoulder. To maintain his control, he relies on preventative violence. Whenever he suspects treason, he executes the threat. He ordered the murders of his own wife, his mother-in-law, and 3 of his own sons just to eliminate potential rivals. His ruthlessness was so well known across the ancient world that the Roman Emperor Augustus famously joked it was safer to be Herod's pig than Herod's son. But every act of brutality is a symptom of deep insecurity. His total reliance on violence reveals a hidden weakness. It makes the most heavily armed man in the region terrified of a baby. While Herod sits in his capital frantically plotting a way to kill his rival, the Magi leave Jerusalem. They follow the star south, out of the centers of authority, to the humble hillside town of Bethlehem. They reach an ordinary house, no warlord plotting a rebellion or prince with royal guards. Instead, the dignitaries find themselves standing in front of a vulnerable toddler sitting with his mother. These men immediately bow down. They open their treasures, offering physical wealth of immense value: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Though the child has not issued a single decree or raised an army, the riches of the East are laid completely at his feet. The wise men recognize what Herod cannot. True heavenly power does not require a throne, a palace, or the threat of violence to command absolute reverence from the learned and the wealthy. Herod waits in Jerusalem for the Magi to return and act as his informants. But God bypasses Herod's military intelligence network with a simple dream, instructing the travelers to return home by another route. Joseph receives a divine warning of his own. Without waiting for morning, he packs up his family in the dead of night and begins a sudden journey south, fleeing across the desert. Their destination is Egypt. It has a large Jewish population for community support, and it sits entirely outside of Herod's Roman jurisdiction. It is a strategic sanctuary hidden in plain sight. When Herod realizes he has been outsmarted, his paranoia erupts. He orders his soldiers into Bethlehem to execute every male child 2 years old and under. He unleashes the full, horrific weight of his military upon a dozen innocent families. But Herod's display of brutal power is a total failure. The true king has already quietly slipped away. Shortly after the massacre, King Herod dies in agony. The kingdom he spent a lifetime murdering his own family to protect slips through his fingers anyway. Rome immediately splits his territory. Judea is handed to his son Archelaus, a man who inherited his father's cruelty but none of his political capability. Archelaus mismanages the region so disastrously that the Roman government officially deposes him a few years later, removing the Herodian dynasty from direct control of the capital. A regime built on paranoia and the edge of a sword is inherently fragile. Within a short window of time, the grand political machinery of Herod the Great is reduced to dust and forgotten relics. Back in Egypt, Joseph learns of Herod's death and begins the journey home. But knowing the cruel Archelaus now rules Judea, Joseph avoids the political center of Jerusalem and steers his family north. They settle in the region of Galilee, in a small town called Nazareth. It has no protective walls, no strategic importance, and a poor reputation among the cultural elite. Men like Herod spend their entire lives fighting for proximity to power. Jesus walks away from it. He chooses to grow up as a laborer in a village so insignificant that skeptics wondered if anything good could even come from it. The child who once threw a king into a murderous panic spent his youth in total obscurity. It was here, in a forgotten town, that the foundation for a very different kind of kingdom